Hey guys, Brent here from Building the Exocet. Finally that time to remove the body off the Miata. So, today is finally here. I'm actually going to pull the body off this thing. Got my Harbor Freight 1-ton folding shop crane. This thing is enormous. Picked it up for $135 after the 20% off coupon, which you get from Harbor Freight every 4 hours in your email. So not a bad deal, decently built, should do the job, also should work for hoisting the engine out of the car. So few things that I got to take care of before the actual removal of the body that I have not done yet. One, axle nuts. I have an impact ready to go. I want to break those loose before removing the body off the car because it's going to be a heck of a lot easier with the body attached to the subframe. Next, I got to make some blocks of wood for between the control arms because once the body's removed off the car, the weight of the engine in the front and the differential in the rear are going to make the suspension want to collapse in the middle because of the weight of those components. Third thing, e-brake cable. I still need to disconnect that from the rear driver's caliper. After that's done, that will be free and that will come off and be removed with the body. Last thing is fuel tank. I did siphon most of it out when I cut the fuel line going to the fuel filter in the last video, but I got about 4 or 5 gallons out. I think there's still probably about 2 or 3 gallons left in there if the gas gauge was reading correctly. So let's get to it. Underneath here you can see drain plug for the gas tank. I siphoned most of the gas out by cutting the line from the fuel filter. However, pulling this plug here will allow me to get the last little bit out of the tank before removal. Also, there is a nut there, nut on the other side, and a coupler, a few in the back. These two I was able to remove. The ones in the back I cannot find out how to access, so once I get the body lifted a little bit off the subframe, I should be able to reach up there and loosen those bolts. E-brake. This cable will need to be removed from the brake caliper as it is attached to the body of the car. I'm going to reuse this part, so I need to actually remove this from the caliper mounting location. I will free it when the body comes up, and it will stay with the body of the car. Front sway bar. This is actually bolted in the front to the subframe here. So like this, there's 2 bolts on this side, 2 bolts on the driver's side to remove. Axle nuts. You don't necessarily, I guess, have to remove these beforehand, but it'd be a lot easier to do on the car. I have a very large compressor and a 1/2-inch air ratchet to remove these from the car. These are torqued extremely high. Also, you can see a lot of people miss, there is a indentation here in the axle nut to go in this groove here. That is to help lock the axle nut in after it's torqued down. So be sure to loosen that and pound that out first before attempting to remove the axle nut. So I'm dealing with a pretty mangled up axle nut here. Right in here, I don't know if you can see, it is really screwed up. So it'd been pinched off in several places in this area, going into this slot here to lock it in. And I have it removed right in here. However, up in here, there's still just an amazing amount of metal just mangled inside there. So I'm at the point where I think trying to pull this away is actually starting to get into the threads and gunking those up more and making it harder to remove. So the impact wasn't doing it on this passenger rear axle nut. Tried some heat. I just have a propane torch. I don't have a large torch. A lot of metal around there, so I don't think that was getting it that hot. Tried a lot of penetrating oil over a few hours. Just about everything I could not get this thing off. All the other 3 axle nuts came off extremely easy. So this one's proven to be the only pain in the butt one, which is good news. But time to get the tire on here, set it on the ground, and use some elbow grease and a big old breaker bar and a jack handle on it. Got everything ready. My checklist is pretty much done. Got axle nuts off. I got the shock tower bolts unmounted. I have the e-brake removed. Of course, wiring harness, all the engine accessories and everything like that out of the way. Let's see here. What else do we have? I got the gas tank drained. A bunch of the little odds and ends that I needed to finish up before I remove the body. So the good news is now ready to get on to removing the lower bolts from the subframe and then start lifting the body off the car. So under the rear subframe here, lower control arm, upper control arm, drive shaft, placing pieces of wood, 2x4 blocking about 6.5 inches long, that will rest between the upper and lower control arms. This, from what I've read, will keep the Miata suspension from collapsing in the middle here due to the weight of the drive shaft, the differential, and all the weight once the power plant frame is removed. So putting one of these blocks on each side in the rear, and then I will be putting 2 more up in the front. Here in the front, picture the same thing, basically going up to the subframe on top up here, down to the lower control arm and wedged between the sway bar end link and lower control arm. So as you can see, these are pretty solid. Once the suspension compresses a bit, it will should hold the car. So the car body is still up on the jack stands, still have the subframe connected. First, you want to go around front and rear and disconnect the bolts holding the subframe here to the unibody. Now, the first 2 bolts on each side you'll find are up here above the upper control arm. Hope you can see that. They are 19 millimeter. They are torqued very high, so use a 1/2 inch breaker bar and socket. You don't want to remove the bolts all the way. As you'll see, I have the jack supporting the oil pan. I have not yet put my blocking up there against this control arm bar here because I need to access these bolts. The jack is going to support the front subframe while the bolts will kind of keep it aligned. Now those are the front 2 bolts. On each side there's also, I believe, just 2 rear bolts. One located here at the very, very end of the lower control arm, back behind there, and the other one right below here with the subframe bolt. Okay, so now 3 of the 4 bolts are removed. There's just 1 bolt here right up there holding the subframe onto the car. Now at this point, my jack stands have moved from under the body to under the lower control arm here to brace. I need to put the tires on, but I need to be able to have access on this bolt, and I do not feel like getting underneath the car in this position. So right now I have my jack on the oil pan, both my front jack stands on the subframe to control arm mounting point here. That way the engine and subframe are completely supported in the middle, so in case this does start to drop off, they're supported. So at this point, I'm on the driver's side. I have that one last bolt there to remove before the front subframe and motor is completely free of the body. You can see the gap right here, and it is still resting on that bolt. Even though I have the subframe supported, it is supported only on that side. As you can see, this jack stand is still wobbling a little, so I need to get it jacked up more to get it, raise that jack stand up, and then be able to have the body, the frame rest on that jack stand so that the subframe will not be resting on that bolt, because when I remove that bolt and all this weight's on there, it's not going to be fun. So because of that, right now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the shock crane over into position here and start getting it mounted up and ready to bolt onto the body, just so there's an extra layer of support there for the body in case something happens once I start to remove the rear. Okay, so quick progress shot here I have 4 Harbor Freight straps, 400-pound capacity, they say. Basically, these are not used to support the weight of the car, but more to that I can jack up parts of the body, tighten them, and adjust the pitch and the level of load of the body out a little bit. This main strap here is a 2,000-pound strap that is attached to the main boom chain, and that goes from here to there. One thing to note on the Harbor Freight press, at the half-ton setting, the arm does not go out to the center of the car. I was originally planning on jacking it up around this point, but this boom will not reach that far unless you were to go to the quarter-ton setting, which obviously we're going to be a lot more weight than that. So, got all strapped down, straps are tight, everything is ready to go. The front subframe here, as you can see, is completely loose of the unibody. You can see it drop down there. On the driver's side, there is still that one more bolt to go. I have been able to get it farther up so that the subframe is touching the unibody again and the stress is off of that bolt. These ones down here, as you can see underneath, it is completely loose there. I have jack stands and a jack supporting actually I gotta lift that jack back up, but supporting the subframe and engine so that they do not fall out, as well as I have the body crane supporting the body as well. So I have a lot of support here going on for this car, but it is very, very loose and wiggly, especially the subframe portion when you get under there. So now it's time to get over to the rear of the car and start loosening it up there. Okay, all 4 bolts are removed from the front subframe. I have my little blocks in here on both sides. As you can see, jacks and a jack stand supporting the front. I was able to get the tires back on the car. So now I am going to, as I want to get the car lower to the ground and stabilize the front end, I'm actually now going to lower the car down, basically lifting up with the jack, removing the jack stands, then slowly letting the jack down a little, slowly letting the body crane down a little until the front rests on the tires and the body's basically sitting on top of the subframe. This way the front's stabilized while I move to the rear and start loosening those bolts and removing the rear subframe. Okay, so the rear subframe is pretty straightforward. There's basically 3 bolts on each side to disconnect the subframe. Right now, rear of the body's on jack stands. The front is completely down on the ground. I do have a jack in front of the, or jack stand in front of the crank pulley just in case something happens up there, but the wood blocks are holding well in the front. So in the rear, if you look along the unibody frame rail here, you'll see in the back part of the subframe there's a bolt. Then moving right above the CV axle, another bolt. And then another nut on the very front of the rear subframe. So basically it's just kind of 1, 2, 3. Same to repeat over here on the passenger side of the car. Now, one thing I do have to fight is removal of the gas tank. I do have the front bolts here removed, but however, you can see there is bolts up there for the gas tank as well that I really can't reach because of the position of them. I might be able to get those out, but what I'm going to do, since the gas tank's empty, once I start lifting the body off the car, then I will be able to reach up underneath in here and get to those bolts a lot easier and let the gas tank drop out. So, all right, time to remove this part. So now I'm at the point where all 6 of the rear subframe bolts are loosened. I removed the two middle bolts. The other 4 nuts are loosened. So the subframe is hanging on the nuts right now of the bolts hanging off the body. So now what I need to do is focus on supporting the differential as well as these control arms here, because once those 4 bolts are removed, this essentially is going to drop down to the floor. As you can see, I still have the car jacked up, the tires are on the car. However, I need to transition now to the point where the body is not going to be supported by jack stands anymore. It is now going to be supported by this this shop crane here. So I need to transition to the point where this crane is supporting the body and jack stands, and the jack will be supporting the weight of the differential and rear subframe. It's kind of a balancing act like it was in the front, but basically what I'm going to do is lift the rear of the car up by the differential, slide the jack stands down, probably to these control arm points here, and then start loosening the nuts more. As I loosen the nuts more, I'm going to be applying more tension to the shop crane, so slowly separating those 2 pieces from each other. Here, just so you can see how I've supported the rear subframe. I do have the wood blocks here, as well as jack stands under each lower control arm, and the jack just as a 3rd point of support for the differential. So at this point, I will not be putting my body under the subframe anymore except for my arms, just in case. And then the shop crane, I'm going to go ahead and check the tension here on these straps. It's a little loose, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. Don't want to tighten up too much, as I don't want to make it harder to re-break the bolts. You are, as you just heard there, going to hear some freaky noises as you go here. That's basically just the, 10 or so bolts sticking out of the subframe that are kind of starting to squeak and rattle loose of the car. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove those last 4 bolts, and then the subframe will be, or the power plant frame will be completely loose of the Miata body. Now at the point that the body should be completely separated from the subframe of the car. Next step is getting the rear end to where the tires are on the ground. Now, what you really want to watch out for when doing this, that I've found made it easy, is those 4 bolts in the rear, and there's 4 in the front that hang through the subframe. Those actually act as guides at this point. As long as you keep tension or pressure from the subframe going up to the body and keep that in contact with those bolts, you will actually, that will keep the subframe centered underneath the body of the car. So when you let it down, you don't want to just drop the whole subframe down, as it will get very loose and wiggly, because it doesn't have any support that it's attached to. So keeping it lined up in those bolts, the holes in the subframe in those bolts, will actually give the body a little stability, and the subframe a little stability as it's dropping down. Now, the difficult part of that is the 2 pieces are, in fact, separate from each other and loose. So as you lower your jack that the subframe is resting on, you must also lower the body crane to get it down to the ground. Then once the whole body is set on the ground, then lifting the body up with the shop crane only will will be the easiest way to balance the subframe while lowering it back down to the floor. Okay, just going to lower the jack a little more here. Get this tire on the ground. Now the tire is on the ground. And I'm going to try to see if I can release the jack to see if those wood supports are going to hold. And you can see the jack coming down now. They are holding. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the jack back up to the differential. Not high, just to give it support so it doesn't drop. Now, head back over to the crane here, tighten it up, and now the lifting of the body can commence. You're going to hear a lot of weird noises and popping while this is taking place. This is due to the fact that bolts are coming loose, things are getting finally becoming removed from the car. As you can see in the front here right now, the car body and the subframe, there's that bolt that was lined up. Now it is out of the front subframe. You should see over here quite a bit higher. That goes back to my issue with the Harbor Freight crane. You can see the body has quite a bit of list to the passenger side because the crane cannot be centered due to the jack hitting it. So that ram that is hitting the body will not allow you to get it completely centered in the car. So what I'm going to attempt to do because of that is jack up this side of the car, then tighten these straps a fair bit, and hopefully be able to raise this part of the car and level it out that way. Okay, so got the first probably 6 inches of lift done on the car. As you can see, these bolts were once down there. Got about a foot of lift in the front. Have to keep going. Right now we're just about to the top of the intake manifold. See just a couple more inches there to clear the engine compartment. That's really the clearance problem in the front. We'll kind of try to slide. I'm not going to go under the car, but not that stupid. I generally only have my wife and children do the work under the car because I don't want to get hurt doing it, but this one I felt it was imperative I got under there and did it. So you can see, that's a joke by the way, you can see the complete removal, no wires, no issues. I actually, believe it or not, got it on the first shot. Pretty amazing, I thought. I was very happy with myself. So, anyways, just gotta put this down here. That is the speedometer cable. I chose not to remove it from the transmission as I already had it removed from the dash of the car. Stepping to the rear here, you can see the separation there. Coming up along the driver's side fender well, you can see the few inches of separation there. Gas tank is still hanging. I'm going to be moving this over this side of the garage onto jack stands to remove the last few bits that were a little too difficult to reach. Up on the passenger side, there you can see the power plant frame rail from the side, as well as the transmission, driveline, shifter, all that good stuff. This will hopefully help me see my oil leak as well. Coming over here to the passenger fender, you can see the separation once again. These bolts guide into there. Those are now loose. Those studs are. So next step is a few more inches and up in the air, and then sliding it over to this side of the garage. Miata body is off. Wasn't near as hard as I thought it would be. It's kind of a nerve-wracking thing working underneath the car. A lot of jitters going on when you know you have a 1,000-pound body above you, and you just need to make sure of a few things. Make sure that you always have the subframe and the engine and the differential supported well as you're unbolting, as well as the body, because you have to realize when those two come apart, they all of a sudden are acting independent of each other. So if you have both areas supported, rear subframe, front subframe, and body, while you're removing, you shouldn't have any issues. Other important thing, make sure you use plenty of straps. Straps, the more you have on there, especially ratcheting straps. I only have one of my ratcheting straps. Here, I should have had about 3 or 4, so I could have actually changed the pitch on the body as I was removing it. As you can see, it lifts a lot to the rear of the car. Would have been nice for being able to clear those fender wells over the rear of the car, to be able to ratchet it up a bit in the back to level the body out. But as far as it goes, I'd say maybe the unbolting and the strapping and lifting of the body, maybe an hour work. It was unbelievably simple. Just like I said, a little jittery working underneath that thing. So real quick, take you on a quick walk around. As you can see here, the Miata body suspended. What my plan is, I'm going to drop this down onto jack stands at the stock jack stand or lifting points right under here, and have it rest on the ground while I remove a few more parts that I need, as well as a lot of the plastic components and stuff before I take it to the junkyard. So as you can see, the body's very loose and hangy, just kind of dwindling there. Now the shot everyone loves to see, the Miata power plant frame. As you can see, the fuel cell is still resting on the rear. I haven't removed that yet. These blocks of wood here are holding up well. They are keeping the front and rear suspension taut and lifted up. A lot of power steering fluid, some more antifreeze, things like that came out of some hoses while I was down there. The motor, is oily, but I think it looks like, the upper part of the block looks dirty, but not horrible. I think a lot of the leaking I have is coming from a bad oil pan gasket down there, among a few other places. But just to give you a quick look around the car, pretty cool thing that you can just lift that unibody right off and still have, as they call this, the roller skate on the floor there. So got the exhaust system to remove a few other things. And then next video, I'm going to show the disposing of the body, getting rid of selling off some parts, as well as kind of breaking down the unneeded parts off the power plant frame, and give you guys an overview in the next video also of what the plan of attack is for getting everything ready for the kit.